My daughter-in-law slept with my husband a week before we signed the divorce papers. I pretended to know nothing. At the meeting, the lawyer handed me a document denying my rights. I smiled. What I did next left everyone in shock. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. The golden afternoon sun filtered softly through the lace curtains of my dining room as I set out the old porcelain for lunch. My mother's set, the one I always brought out for important family gatherings. I had just finished arranging the silverware when my phone rang. Paige's name flashed on the screen. Her voice trembled when she asked if we could talk, just the two of us. Paige was Olivia's older sister, my daughter-in-law's sibling. Though we'd always been polite, we were never close. Something about her tone filled me with unease, but I tried to shake it off. At 64, after decades of nurturing a family, I still clung to traditions. The house felt impossibly quiet these days. My husband, Richard, had become a stranger in his own home, hiding behind late hours and closed doors. My son, Ethan, 35, was nearly as distant, tangled up in his marriage to Olivia, whose visits were little more than obligatory appearances. The doorbell's chimes startled me. Paige stood outside, her face pale, clutching her purse as though it might shield her from bad news. Her eyes, usually so carefully made up, were rimmed red, mascara smudged, the remnants of tears still lingering. "Helen, thank you for seeing me," she whispered. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in." I led her into the dining room, offering her the cucumber sandwiches and lemon cakes she'd once said she loved. She managed a wan smile but didn't touch the food. Instead, she stared at her hands, knuckles white against the tablecloth. "What's wrong, Paige?" I asked softly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." She looked up, and in that instant, I saw pain and guilt and something else. Desperate love, maybe. "Helen, I need to tell you something, and I don't know how to say it without destroying everything." My heart thundered in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "Whatever it is, we'll get through it." Paige's breath came ragged, tears shining in her green eyes. "It's about Olivia and Richard." The world seemed to lurch, but I forced myself to remain composed, my hands folded in my lap. "What about them?" "They're having an affair," Paige blurted. "I've known for weeks. I saw them together at that cafe near Richard's office. They were holding hands, kissing, like lovers. Something inside me fractured, sharp and cold, but I didn't flinch." "Are you sure?" Paige nodded, tears streaming now. "I confronted Olivia. She didn't even bother denying it. She laughed, said it wasn't my business. But Helen, the thing she said about you..." Paige's voice broke. I dreaded the answer, but asked anyway. "What things?" "She said you were old and dull, that Richard deserved better. She said once the divorce was final, she'd make sure you got as little as possible. She's been planning this, marrying Ethan just to get close to your family, your money. She's been working on Richard for months." The room spun, but I gripped the edge of the table. 42 years, and only now did I truly see the man I had married. That night, I lay beside him in our bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind burning. If they wanted to play games, fine. But they had no idea who they were up against. Living with betrayal was agony. Every smile I forced, every small kindness I performed, it all cut me anew. But I persisted, keeping up my role as loving wife and mother while quietly watching their every move. 3 days after Paige's revelation, Olivia breezed into our home for Sunday dinner. Dressed in an expensive new dress, her hair immaculate, she hugged me with theatrical warmth. "Helen, you look amazing," she gushed, her perfume sickeningly familiar. the same scent I'd found on Richard's shirts. Thank you, Olivia. Ethan should be here soon. Would you like some wine while we wait? That'd be perfect. She settled at the kitchen island, crossing her legs. Actually, I was hoping we could talk. Just us girls. My heart thudded, but I poured the wine, masking my dread. Of course. What's on your mind? She leaned in, voice syrupy with fake concern. I'm worried about you and Richard. You two seem so distant. There's tension. Sometimes marriages run their course, you know? Life is too short to stay where you aren't happy. I nodded, feigning thoughtfulness. You may be right. We have had a rough patch. Her eyes glimmered with satisfaction she couldn't hide. Have you considered counseling? Or maybe it's time to think about what makes you both happy. You think we should divorce? I asked, tone neutral. Oh, I'm not saying that, she said quickly, her concern so fake it nearly choked me. But you deserve happiness. You're still beautiful. Plenty of men would be lucky to have you. I smiled and nodded, the naive older woman being gently manipulated towards divorce. At least that's what Olivia thought. Inside, I cataloged every word, every insincere gesture. This was the real Olivia, mask slipping ever so slightly. The following week, I took a quiet, decisive step. I made an appointment with a new attorney, Jessica Rowe, a sharp, meticulous woman with a reputation for taking on the ugliest divorce cases and walking out with the best results. Not the old family lawyer Richard and I had relied on for decades. No, I needed someone who owed me nothing, who could see the situation clearly and had nothing invested in pretending the past still meant something. Jessica's office was tucked into a modest building downtown, far from the elegant circles Richard and Olivia liked to frequent. As I sat across from her, the weight of 42 years pressed against my shoulders, but I kept my voice steady as I told her everything. Not about the affair itself, no, not yet. About the silence in my house, the disappearing affection, the creeping sense that everything I'd worked for was slipping through my fingers. She listened with attentive eyes, occasionally making a note, her dark hair swept back and her expression unwavering. Mrs. Garrett, she finally said, why haven't you confronted your husband directly, or your daughter-in-law? I thought of Richard's smirk, Olivia's saccharine smiles, the way they both seemed so certain I would never dare to fight back. Because I want to know exactly what I'm up against before I make any decisions. My house, our assets, my family's legacy. I need to know where I stand, legally, emotionally. Jessica nodded. That's wise. Let's start with your assets. How is the house titled? We spent the next hour buried in documents, property deeds, investment portfolios, business records. Some of these I'd never seen before. My father had helped Richard and me purchase the house, but I'd forgotten how much of the down payment had come from my family's inheritance. Jessica's sharp eyes lit up as she read the fine print on a battered folder I brought out from a box in the attic. Your grandfather was a clever man, Mrs. Garrett. See this? This trust has some unusual clauses, very forward-thinking for its time. What do you mean? I asked, hope flickering in my chest for the first time in weeks. She tapped the page. This house can never be sold or transferred to anyone outside your direct bloodline, even in the event of a divorce. But look at this. If the marriage ends due to adultery, the innocent party retains full rights to the trust property, and the other forfeits all claim. My breath caught. So, if I can prove Richard's affair, he gets nothing? Jessica nodded. Not just the house, several properties and investments attached to this trust. Your husband likely has no idea. He probably assumes this will be a standard 50-50 split. For the first time in months, I felt something other than dread. Something like hope. The chessboard had more pieces than my husband or Olivia could see. That night, I watched Richard try to play his part. He complimented my cooking with forced cheer, kissed me on the forehead like a stranger. I noticed with clinical detachment how guilt flickered behind his eyes, how arrogance smothered it. Later, as we prepared for bed, I broached the subject Olivia had tried to plant. "Richard, I've been thinking about what Olivia said the other day, about our marriage." He froze, back turned as he hung up his shirt. "What about it?" I kept my tone breezy, as if I were discussing the weather. "Maybe she's right. Maybe it's time to consider our options." He turned, searching for any sign of a trap. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" I shrugged, as if the word didn't tear me apart. "Maybe. I just want us both to be happy, wherever that leads." Richard nodded, and I could almost see the relief bloom on his face. He tried to look somber, but I recognized the glint of excitement. "If that's what you want, Helen, I just want you to be happy too." A liar. But I smiled, playing the role he expected. I lay awake, long after he began snoring, staring at the ceiling. I pictured Olivia's smug smile, her expensive perfume, the way she clung to Ethan in front of the world while plotting with his father behind closed doors. They thought they'd won already. They had no idea that the real game was only just beginning. The next days blurred together. Sunday dinners, forced pleasantries, Olivia's relentless campaign to present herself as the wounded, caring daughter-in-law. She watched me closely, fishing for signs of resistance. I gave her none. Instead, I practiced small acts of subterfuge, copying documents, photographing receipts, collecting bits of evidence. Each time I played the naive, defeated wife, it cost me a piece of my soul, but the stack of proof grew taller and taller. Richard, meanwhile, grew bolder. He stayed out later, no longer even bothering with excuses. I tracked his comings and goings, his meetings with Olivia, the whispered conversations when they thought I wasn't out of earshot. They were so certain of themselves, so sure I was powerless, that they became careless. One afternoon, while Richard was out and Ethan at work, Olivia stopped by the house under the guise of dropping off groceries for me. She found me in the garden, pruning the rose bushes. Her heels sank into the earth as she approached, her smile gleaming. "Helen, are you sure you don't want help packing? I heard you're thinking about moving into the condo after the divorce. It'll be so much easier for you." I wiped my hands on my apron and looked at her, feigning gratitude. "You're very thoughtful, Olivia, but I'll manage." She moved closer, lowering her voice. "You know, sometimes starting over is the best thing. My mother always said women our age should be realistic about what we can handle." She was practically gloating. "Thank you for your advice," I replied, keeping my tone soft. "I've always believed women our age are capable of more than anyone expects." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face before she smoothed it over. "If you ever need anything, just ask." She patted my arm as if I were a helpless old woman, then strutted back to her car, triumphant. Inside, I watched her drive away, feeling the heat of rage and resolve pulse through me. My hands shook, not from fear, but anticipation. I was not the weakling she thought I was. I was the daughter of a long line of women who survived, endured, and outlasted everything thrown at them. The following week, I met Jessica Rowe again. I handed over the folder of evidence I had gathered, the trust papers, photos, records, notes Paige had given me about what she'd seen at the cafe. She studied the stack, nodding as she went. "You're ready, Helen. Just a little more and you'll have everything you need." I felt the faintest trace of pride. For years I'd kept the peace. Now I was preparing for war. Sunday arrived again, and with it, another family dinner. This one stilted, tense, like actors trying to remember their lines. Ethan was subdued, eyes darting between Richard and Olivia as if sensing something was off. Olivia poured the wine, her hand lingering just a moment too long on Richard's shoulder. I smiled sweetly, making note of every glance, every slip. After dessert, when Ethan went out to take a phone call, Olivia cornered me in the hallway. "You're so calm, Helen. I admire that. Most women would be emotional, I suppose." I gave her my most benign smile. I find that calmness is a virtue in difficult times, Olivia. It keeps the mind sharp. She stared at me, suspicion flickering. For the first time, I saw a crack in her confidence. Upstairs, Richard's office door closed with a soft click. I heard Olivia's laughter, low and secretive. In the kitchen, I wiped down the counters, every motion precise, rehearsed. I'd played the fool for months, but the mask was beginning to chafe. It was almost time to take it off. That night, I stood at the window looking out over the dark garden where the roses slept. The air hummed with secrets. Every shadow seemed to pulse with things left unsaid. I had been patient for a very long time. But the end game was near. The days that followed were a blur of performance. I became an actress in my own life. Every smile rehearsed, every word measured, each gesture hiding 1,000 wounds. I maintained the home as if nothing was wrong. Fresh flowers on the table, dinner always ready by 6, the sound of the radio quietly humming in the kitchen. But beneath the surface, I was a hawk circling, watching for the right moment to strike. Richard drifted further from me with each passing day. His affection became brittle, almost theatrical, like a man who'd learned the script but forgotten the meaning behind the words. The evenings grew longer, the silences heavier, and in the space between us, resentment grew like a weed. He came home later and later, often carrying the faintest whiff of Olivia's perfume. When he looked at me, it was with the polite distance of a man talking to a stranger in an elevator. Ethan was the only thing that kept me tethered to the past, a gentle reminder of the boy I'd raised, now a man battered by his own invisible storms. He visited when he could, but even he seemed to sense that a rot was spreading through the family, something poisonous and unspoken. It was on one of these evenings, as I sat folding laundry in front of the TV, that Paige called again. This time her voice was steadier, but urgent. "Helen, I want to make sure you're all right." I hesitated, then said softly, "You were right to tell me, Paige, but now you need to let me handle things. I have a plan, and I need you to trust me." There was a long pause. "You're not alone in this," she whispered. "You're not the only one Olivia's hurt." I closed my eyes, feeling the ache of those words. "I know. And when it's time, you'll be the first to know." The next day, I found myself staring at the photo on the mantel, our wedding portrait. I was so young, full of hope, clinging to Richard's arm as if he were the center of the universe. That girl had no idea what waited for her. The betrayals, the heartbreak, the feeling of being invisible in her own home. But she'd also had no idea how strong she would become. Later that week, I attended another meeting with Jessica Rowe. She was waiting for me, files open, her gaze sharp. She said quietly, "I have good news." Our private investigator confirmed everything. Richard and Olivia haven't been subtle. There are credit card receipts, security camera footage from that cafe. It's more than enough. A strange relief swept through me, like stepping off a bridge and realizing halfway down that you can fly. I asked, "What happens next?" She smiled, not unkindly. "Now we wait for the right moment. Let them think they've won. Sign the divorce papers on their terms if you must, but as soon as it's final, you invoke the trust. Richard gets nothing, and Olivia, well, she's left with ashes." I exhaled slowly, letting the plan settle in my bones. For the first time, I could see a life beyond Richard, beyond the hollow shell of our marriage, a life where I wasn't a footnote in my own story. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in deception. Richard grew more careless, Olivia more brazen. She paraded through my house as though she already owned it, offering little suggestions for redecorating, hinting at ways I might make the transition easier. Each word, each fake smile, was a dagger I learned to bear with grace. Ethan noticed the changes too. He grew quieter, his eyes shadowed by confusion. One afternoon, as we walked through the garden, he turned to me. "Mom, is there something you're not telling me?" I wanted to hold him, to spill everything, to warn him about the wolves circling the family he loved. But I only smiled and shook my head. "I'm just tired, sweetheart. Everything will be all right soon. I promise." He looked unconvinced, but let it go, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead before heading home. That night, Richard came home late. Again. He tried to explain it away, but the lie was tired, worn out from overuse. I watched him as he drifted through the kitchen, his steps uncertain, his hands trembling slightly as he poured himself a drink. "You're quiet tonight," he observed. "I'm just thinking," I replied, keeping my voice gentle. "About what?" "About the future. About what comes next." He studied me for a moment, trying to decipher the meaning behind my calm. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. A week later, the meeting finally arrived, the day that would decide everything. We gathered in the glassy, imposing offices of Martin Cross, Richard's old friend and chosen divorce attorney. The city skyline gleamed behind him, the kind of place designed to make people like me feel small. Richard sat to my right, trying to project confidence, but betraying nervousness in every tap of his foot. Olivia was there, too. She insisted. "For Ethan's sake," she said. She clung to my son's arm with the possessiveness of someone who knew their time was running out. Martin Cross greeted us with the oily warmth of a man who thought he already knew the outcome. "Let's keep this amicable. No need for drama. We're all adults." He slid the folder across the table to me, his manicured finger tapping the signature line. "Here's what we're proposing. You'll keep the downtown condo and a small alimony. Richard will retain the house, the business, and the investments. Clean, simple, fair." The words were a slap in the face. I glanced down at the numbers. So much less than what I'd built, less than what I deserved. I felt Richard's gaze on me, daring me to object. But I kept my face serene, reading every page as if it were a grocery list. "And the house?" I asked quietly. Martin smiled condescendingly. "It's better left in Richard's name, for tax reasons, for maintenance. These things can get complicated. Wouldn't want to burden you." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Olivia stiffen, the gears in her mind already turning, already imagining how she would redecorate my bedroom, how she would erase every trace of me. I nodded, closed the folder, and reached for the pen. "Where do I sign?" The room fell silent. Even Olivia blinked, momentarily thrown by my willingness to capitulate. Ethan looked stricken, torn between loyalty and disbelief. "Mom, are you sure?" he whispered. I touched his cheek, giving him a small, reassuring smile. "Sometimes, sweetheart, you have to know when to fight and when to walk away." Richard let out a shaky relief of sigh, and Martin began to collect the papers with barely concealed triumph. Olivia squeezed Ethan's hand, her eyes gleaming with victory. As we left the building, Ethan hugged me tightly, tears gathering in his eyes. "Are you really okay?" he asked. I held him close, feeling the weight of everything that had brought us here. "Everything is going to work out exactly as it should," I whispered. Olivia appeared beside him, all bright teeth and cold eyes. "Your mother is so strong, Ethan. She's going to be so much happier now." I smiled at her, letting her see none of the fire raging inside me. "I'm sure we all will be." As I watched them walk away, hand in hand, a sense of icy satisfaction settled in my chest. They thought they'd won. They thought I was defeated. But the real game was only just beginning, and I was finally ready to play. 2 weeks after signing away nearly everything I'd built, I stood in my garden, pruning roses, the sharp scent of earth and blossom mingling with the heavy memory of my wedding vows. The sky was cloudless, but my heart churned with a storm of anticipation. I had not told a soul about the trust, about Jessica Rose's plan, or the evidence meticulously gathered and tucked away in her office safe. I let Richard and Olivia savor their apparent victory, let them imagine themselves lords and lady of my ancestral home, let them plan, redecorate, measure curtains, count money that would never be theirs. I had waited my whole life for happiness to simply return, like a faithful dog. Now I understood that sometimes you had to chase it down yourself. Ethan's visits became more frequent, but he was quiet, distracted. He moved through the house with the careful steps of a man walking across thin ice. On one such morning, as dew still glistened on the lawn, his car pulled up with a strange heaviness. I could see, even from the kitchen window, that something had shifted in him. He didn't wave, didn't smile. He just sat, clutching the steering wheel, as if uncertain whether to come in or drive away forever. When he finally stepped out, I saw how drawn he looked. His shirt wrinkled, his eyes rimmed red. I rushed out to meet him, dropping my gardening shears on the walk. "Ethan, what is it?" He opened his mouth, closed it, and then, voice cracking, "She's been lying to me, Mom. All this time, she's been lying." I felt the sting of tears behind my own eyes, but I held them back. "Come inside." We sat on the front steps, the roses nodding in the gentle breeze. For a while he was silent, staring at his hands as if trying to find the words carved into his own palms. Finally, he spoke. "Paige called me. She said I needed to look at Olivia's phone. I thought she was just being dramatic. But then Olivia left her phone on the nightstand and—" He swallowed. "There were hundreds of messages, Mom. Her and Dad planning everything. The divorce, what to say to the lawyers, how to keep you from fighting back. Even laughing at me. At you." I closed my eyes. I had known all of this, but hearing it spoken, hearing the pain in my son's voice was almost more than I could bear. "He confronted her," Ethan went on, the words tumbling now. "She didn't even try to lie. She just said I was naive, that I could never give her what Dad could, that soon she'd have the house, the money, everything." The casual cruelty in those words burned me to my core. Years of loving her as my own wasted on someone who saw family as a ladder to climb and then destroy. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I told her to get out. She laughed. Said soon she'd be living somewhere much nicer anyway." He meant my house, my family's legacy. The rooms where I'd rocked him as a baby, the kitchen where he took his first steps. I reached out, squeezing his shoulder. "You didn't deserve this, Ethan. None of us did." He looked up, truly seeing me for the first time. "How are you so calm, Mom? How can you just go on?" For a long time, I said nothing. Then I took a deep breath and decided he deserved the truth. Because I know more than they think I do. And because I have a plan, Ethan. I played along for a reason. He frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" So I told him. I told him everything. Paige's warning, the evidence, Jessica Rowe, and the trust that protected everything my family had ever built. I told him how I'd played the part of the defeated wife, letting Richard and Olivia walk into their own trap, step by step. "You knew all along?" He wondered in awe and hurt. "I knew," I said quietly. "Sometimes the best way to win is to let your enemies think they've already won." He stared at me as if I'd just turned into someone else. Maybe I had. "What happens now?" "That's up to them. When they try to claim their prize, they'll discover it was never theirs to begin with." A sound interrupted us. A car pulling into the driveway fast, gravel spitting beneath the tires. It was Paige. She hurried up the walk, her face pale, eyes wide with guilt and hope. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said, voice trembling. "I should have told you sooner. I should have stopped Olivia before—" He cut her off, drawing her into a sudden, tight embrace. "You saved me," he said fiercely. "You saved us." They held each other for a long moment, grief and relief mingling in the sunlight. I watched, something bittersweet blooming in my chest. Even in the ruins of what Olivia and Richard had tried to destroy, something honest, something good was beginning to grow. After a while, Paige tried to leave, but Ethan insisted she stay for dinner. He said, "Mom makes the best roast in the world." He said, "Mom makes the best roast in the world," voice breaking just a little. I watched as they set the table, side by side, like children again. One folding napkins, the other lighting the candles. For the first time in months, I felt the chill lift from my home. Later, as we cleared the dishes, Paige's voice was quiet, uncertain. "Olivia always said that I was too soft, that I would never get anywhere in life because I was decent." Ethan looked at her with gentle seriousness. "Decency isn't weakness. You were the only one strong enough to tell the truth." I put my hand on hers, the touch meaning more than any words I could offer. I said, "Family isn't blood. It's what you do when it matters." Night fell softly, filling the house with a peace I hadn't known in years. As I watched Paige and Ethan talking on the porch, I realized that what Olivia had tried to destroy, she had only exposed. The strength beneath the quiet, the unbreakable bond of people who choose each other when everything else falls away. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Richard and Olivia still believed they'd won. But as I turned out the lights, moving through the home my mother and grandmother had loved before me, I knew the truth. Sometimes the only way to reclaim what's yours is to let it go, just long enough to watch your enemies destroy themselves. Morning light crept across the living room as I finished organizing the last of my documents. My nerves were taut, but I found an unexpected calm in the rhythm of preparation. I sorted photographs, emails, printouts of text messages, each piece evidence of Richard and Olivia's betrayal. Jessica Rowe had said to wait, but the time for waiting was almost over. A call from Jessica confirmed the last detail. "Helen, I've finished reviewing everything. If they contest, we'll bury them with the evidence. But if they don't, the trust stands. The house, the properties, all yours. Are you ready?" I smiled, my first true smile in months. I've never been more ready. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter of my home, running my hand over the old brickwork, touching the ivy that curled along the walls. I remembered planting that ivy as a girl, helping my mother carry heavy bags of mulch. I remembered the fierce pride in my grandmother's eyes when she'd handed me the key to the front door on my wedding day. How many sacrifices had built these walls? How many dreams, how much love and labor? For years, I'd protected it all with patience and kindness, only to have it threatened by the people I trusted most. Not anymore. Richard barely spoke to me in the days that followed. He'd moved into the downstairs guest room to avoid tension, he claimed, though I suspected it was easier than facing me night after night. Olivia, meanwhile, haunted the house as if she were already the lady of the manor. I let her believe it. Let her make lists, order samples, chat breezily with interior decorators on the phone. She had no idea that her little castle was built on sand. One evening, as I trimmed roses in the fading light, Olivia appeared at the garden gate. Her smile brittle but triumphant. "Helen, I wanted to let you know, Richard and I are planning a small gathering once the divorce is finalized. Just friends and family. I hope you'll consider attending. For Ethan's sake, of course." There was venom in her sweetness, and I saw through it as clearly as sunlight on glass. "That's very thoughtful of you, Olivia," I replied, keeping my voice soft. "But I think it's time you and Richard start planning your future without worrying about me." She laughed, high and hollow. "Oh, I'm sure we'll manage. Not many women your age find happiness again after a divorce. I hope you're not too lonely in that little condo." I smiled, letting her savor her victory. But inside, something sharp and wild rose up. "Don't worry, Olivia. I've always found happiness where others least expect." She stared at me for a beat too long, uncertainty flickering behind her eyes, then turned and strode away. The next day, Ethan called. His voice was clearer now, steadier. "I've moved out, Mom. I couldn't stay in that house with her. Paige is helping me pack up what I want. I just need some time." "I'm so proud of you," I told him. "You did the right thing." "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked with real concern in his voice. "I'm more than okay," I replied, feeling the truth in my bones. On the morning the divorce was to be finalized, I dressed with deliberate care. I wore my mother's pearls, a navy dress I'd saved for special occasions. In the mirror, I saw not a defeated woman, but someone renewed, someone who'd faced betrayal and come out the other side unbroken. The law offices of Martin Cross gleamed with polished marble and intimidating silence. Richard sat in the reception area, pale and fidgeting, checking his phone every several seconds. Olivia was there as well, her hand possessively on Ethan's arm, though Ethan looked anywhere but at her. "Mrs. Garrett, Mr. Garrett," Martin called as he led us into a conference room as frigid as a tomb. I took my seat across from Richard, the stack of legal papers between us like a wall. Martin reviewed the terms, sliding the documents across the table. "Sign here, Helen, and here. Richard, your initials, please. We'll file this by end of day." I signed my name in steady script, my hands not trembling in the least. Richard's signature wobbled slightly, the only crack in his careful composure. As the last page was signed, Martin looked up. "Congratulations, it's all official." Olivia's face was radiant with satisfaction, as if she'd won a crown. She murmured to Richard, "Darling." "We did it, darling," loud enough for all to hear. "Now everything will finally be ours." Ethan stared at her, the last remnants of hope finally extinguished. I saw pain and something new. Resolve. As we stood to leave, Richard glanced at me. For the first time, there was uncertainty in his eyes. "Helen, are you sure you're all right?" I held his gaze, letting him see the steel he'd ignored for decades. "I've never been better, Richard." On the sidewalk outside, Olivia sidled up to me, her voice a hiss. "You should start packing. We'll be moving in within the month." I simply smiled, serene as a queen. "You might want to hold off on those plans, Olivia." She rolled her eyes and walked away, her heels clicking like gunshots. That evening, I sat alone in the house, my house, savoring the silence. The legal battle was done. The next round would begin soon, and when it did, Richard and Olivia would learn that not everything can be bought, stolen, or manipulated. Justice sometimes waits in silence, but when it comes, it leaves no doubt. I poured myself a glass of wine, letting the first true sense of peace in months settle deep in my soul. The chessboard was set, the pieces moved, and tomorrow it would be my turn to reveal the truth. 2 days after the divorce papers were filed, I woke to the sharp ring of my phone. The sun was just rising, painting the sky pale gold. The name on the screen, Jessica Rowe, made my heart leap. I answered quickly, voice hushed with anticipation. "Helen," Jessica said, her tone brisk. "Today's the day. I've already sent notice to Richard's lawyer and the title office. The trust provision is being enforced. He's about to learn he signed away any claim he ever thought he had. I closed my eyes, letting the moment wash over me. 42 years of marriage, of sacrifice and silence, had come down to this: a single morning when truth would break through every lie. "Thank you, Jessica," I whispered, "for everything." After hanging up, I made coffee and watched the sun climb over the garden. The world felt brighter, crisper. Even the air in the house was lighter, as if the old walls themselves sensed a coming freedom. For months, I had lived inside a storm of secrets, and now, at last, the clouds were parting. Mid-morning, I heard the heavy tread of Richard's steps on the porch. He didn't bother knocking, just barged in, face red and trembling, anger and panic swirling in his eyes. For the first time in years, he looked smaller to me, shrunken by the weight of his own mistakes. "What did you do?" he spat, voice shaking. "My lawyer called. He says there's some irregularity with the house. The title company won't transfer it. Did you know about this trust all along?" I set down my mug, meeting his gaze squarely. "Of course I knew. It's my family's house, Richard. My grandfather built those protections for a reason, so no one could take what he worked for away from his blood." Richard's face went white, then mottled with anger. You tricked me after all these years." "No, Richard. You tricked yourself. I just let you." He sank onto a kitchen chair, shoulders slumped. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, the words thin and lost. "Wherever you like," I replied, ice in my voice. "You and Olivia have always had so many plans, haven't you? I'm sure you'll land on your feet." His eyes glistened. "Please, Helen, isn't there something we can work out?" "There's nothing left to work out," I said quietly. "You chose your path. Now you get to walk it." A silence stretched between us, heavy with all the things he'd never see, never own, never understand. I felt the past loosen its grip, 42 years uncoiling from my chest, leaving me, at last, able to breathe. Richard left the way he'd come, in defeat and silence. I watched him go, feeling only the faintest tremor of regret. Not for him, but for the years I'd lost believing I could trust him. By noon, word had spread. Olivia's car pulled up fast, gravel scattering. She stormed into the house, her fury filling the air like the snap of a thunderstorm. "What is going on? Richard said something about a trust, about you keeping everything? That's not possible, Helen." I regarded her as I might a venomous snake. "It's not only possible, it's done. The house, the land, every property attached to the trust, they're all in my name. The law is clear." She gaped at me, real fear flaring behind her pretty eyes. You can't do this. We had a deal. We were supposed to—" "No, Olivia," I said, my voice calm and implacable. "You and Richard had a fantasy, and it ends today." She tried a new tactic, her voice shifting to pleading, almost weeping. "Where am I supposed to go, Helen? Where are we supposed to live?" I looked at her, really looked at her. All the cruelty, all the lies, every manipulative scheme collapsed into a pitiful plea. "You're clever, Olivia. You'll figure something out. But you'll do it far away from here." She started to protest, but I walked past her, opening the front door wide. "It's time to go. You have no place here now, not as my son's wife, not as my husband's lover, not as anything." She stumbled past me, tears streaking her cheeks, rage simmering beneath the surface. I watched her leave, and the old ache in my chest was replaced by something new. Peace. Afterwards, I wandered through the house. Sunlight streamed across the hardwood, illuminating every old photograph, every scar on the banister, every handprint left by Ethan when he was small. This house had survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, And now this. I ran my fingers across the mantle, feeling the pulse of history steady in my veins. The phone rang. Ethan's number. When I answered, his voice was thick with emotion. "Mom, are you okay? I just heard Dad called me furious. Olivia's lost her mind. I'm so sorry for everything." I smiled softly, letting the love I felt for him soak into every word. "You have nothing to apologize for. You didn't do any of this. You only ever tried to love your family." He was silent. Then, "Can I come home? Just for a while?" "Always," I whispered. "Always." Late that night, with the house blessedly silent, I sat by the window and watched the stars. I thought about my mother, my grandmother, women who had faced storms and refused to yield. I thought about Ethan and Paige and the family that could be rebuilt from what remained. And I thought about Richard and Olivia, exiled from the life they'd schemed to steal, left only with each other and their guilt. The world had shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Tomorrow I would start building something new, something truly mine. The next few days unfolded like the gentle breaking of a fever. The house was suddenly filled with a stillness I hadn't known in years. Not a lonely quiet, but the kind that settles after a storm, when you realize the worst has passed. I wandered from room to room, letting myself feel everything at last. Grief, yes, but also freedom. On the third morning, Ethan returned home with a single suitcase. He looked older, more worn, his smile smaller, but real. Paige dropped him off and lingered in the entryway, uncertain if she belonged. I opened my arms, and she let herself be pulled in, resting her head briefly on my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not hating me, for letting me tell the truth." I stroked her hair like I might a frightened child. "You were brave, Paige. You did what so many wouldn't. There's nothing to forgive." Ethan joined us in the kitchen, his movements careful, as if the world might break at any moment. We made breakfast together, talking in soft voices, not about Richard or Olivia, but about Ethan's job, Paige's volunteer work, and the ordinary details that made up a life. There was comfort in the mundane, a promise that even after devastation, the simple things could still anchor us. Later that afternoon, as sunlight slanted across the garden, Ethan and I sat on the back porch. He watched the roses sway, his gaze distant. "I feel so stupid," he said at last. "I should have seen it coming. I should have protected you, protected us." I took his hand, my fingers wrapping around his like a lifeline. "You don't have to carry this, Ethan. They made their choices, not you. Love isn't foolish. Trusting people isn't wrong. If it was, this world would be a lonely place." He nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. "I want to believe that, Mom. I really do." Paige joined us, carrying a plate of cookies she'd baked from a recipe she found in my old cookbook. She sat beside Ethan, careful, uncertain. I watched as he reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together without a word. It wasn't romance yet, but it was something honest, a shared recognition of pain and possibility. The three of us spent the evening together, making dinner, watching old movies, laughing at stories from Ethan's childhood. There were awkward moments, of course, places where the shape of Richard and Olivia's absence was felt sharply, like a missing tooth, but there was healing, too. For the first time, the house felt like it belonged to us again. The next morning, the doorbell rang just after sunrise. I answered it to find Richard on the porch, looking diminished and desperate. He clutched a briefcase, eyes bloodshot, clothes rumpled as if he hadn't slept at all. "He needs to talk," he said. I stepped aside, letting him in. Ethan and Paige hovered at the edge of the kitchen, listening but silent. Richard set the briefcase on the table and opened it, spreading out documents, financial records, bank statements, letters from lawyers. "It's all gone," he said. "The investments, the house, everything. Olivia left last night. Took what little cash we had, emptied the joint account. I don't know where she is. His hand shook. He looked up at me, a broken man. I've lost everything, Helen. Not just the money, but you, Ethan, even Olivia. I deserve it, I know, but I just need to understand. How did you know? How did you do it? I looked at him, really looked at the man I'd spent most of my life with. For a long moment, I saw not my betrayer, but the frightened boy he must have once been. You taught me to be patient, Richard. You taught me to listen and to plan. Maybe you forgot who I was, but I never did. I protected what mattered even when you couldn't. He started to cry then, shoulder shaking with a grief I'd stopped feeling for him long ago. Ethan stood at the threshold, pain and pity warring on his face. I walked over, touched Richard's arm lightly, a gesture of closure, not forgiveness. I wish things had been different, I said softly, but you made your choices. Now you have to live with them. He nodded, broken, and gathered up his papers. He turned to Ethan, voice trembling. I'm sorry, son, for everything. Ethan swallowed hard but said nothing. Sometimes there are no words for what's been lost. Richard left the house, our house, for the last time. As the sun set, Paige and I sat together at the kitchen table, the day's events settling between us. Are you all right? She asked. I considered the question. I think I am, for the first time in a long while. She smiled shyly. I'm glad. You've taught me that it's never too late to start again. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that feels like companionship, not emptiness. I thought of the future, a future with Ethan and Paige, a future where the house would ring with laughter again, not secrets. I knew there would be pain, more healing, maybe even more betrayals. But I also knew this. I was no longer afraid. The worst had happened, and I was still standing. And as darkness settled, I finally felt a cautious, genuine hope begin to bloom. It was the day after Richard's visit that the storm truly broke. A squad car rolled up the long gravel drive just after breakfast, its blue lights glinting through the kitchen window. I froze, a surge of panic rising. Had Olivia done something desperate? Had Richard tried to take revenge now that he had nothing left? Ethan came to my side, his face grim. Paige hovered in the doorway, clutching a dish towel in anxious hands. When the doorbell rang, I took a steadying breath and answered it. A tall, broad-shouldered man, in plain clothes, stood on the porch, his badge glinting from his belt. Mrs. Garrett? Detective Paul Martinez, City Police. May I come in? I nodded, heart pounding. He stepped inside, removing his hat, and greeted Ethan and Paige with a courteous nod. I'm here because of a complaint filed by a Miss Olivia Miller. She alleges that you falsified legal documents to keep her and Mr. Garrett from receiving their fair share in the divorce. Ethan's mouth fell open, and for a moment I thought I might faint. But the detective's face softened. I'm not here to arrest you, Mrs. Garrett. In fact, I already spoke to your attorney, Ms. Rowe. The trust is airtight, and there's ample evidence of infidelity. Ms. Miller's complaint has no legal merit. Relief flooded me, and I let myself sink into a kitchen chair. Thank you, Detective. This has been a difficult time for all of us. He nodded gravely. It gets worse, I'm afraid. We have reason to believe Miss Miller has been involved in identity theft and attempted insurance fraud against you. We're opening a criminal investigation. Ethan's fists clenched on the table. She's dangerous, Mom. I'm so sorry I ever brought her into our lives. Detective Martinez pulled out a folder. Your lawyer mentioned some suspicious documents and a forged insurance policy. We'll need statements and copies of everything you have. And Mrs. Garrett, if you ever feel threatened, you call us immediately. I promised I would. After he left, Paige sat beside me, her eyes wide with shock. She really would have done anything to get what she wanted, even destroy you. I nodded, a cold realization settling in my chest. She never loved any of us. It was always about what she could take. For days afterward, Olivia's shadow hung over us. I learned that she had fled town, draining what little remained in her joint accounts with Richard, and disappearing, leaving no forwarding address. A woman who'd built her life on schemes had finally run out of tricks. Richard tried calling a few times, his messages alternating between apology, bitterness, and confusion. I listened to none of them. His world had crumbled. His marriage, his pride, his reputation, even the woman he'd destroyed his family for. All gone. For the first time, I didn't pity him. He had made his choices, and the world had answered. Ethan threw himself into work, but evenings were different now. He and Paige would help me cook dinner, their conversations growing warmer and more natural each day. Sometimes I'd hear them laughing in the garden, sharing secrets and plans. The old ache in my chest softened, replaced by something lighter. The hope that healing, real healing, might be possible after all. One Saturday, Paige stayed late to help me put up preserves. The kitchen was filled with the scent of strawberries and sugar. She looked at me over the bubbling pot, her eyes vulnerable. "Do you think I'll ever stop feeling guilty for what Olivia did? For not seeing it sooner?" I set my hand over hers, steady. "Paige, we can't be responsible for someone else's darkness. You told the truth. You tried to protect Ethan, and you helped me more than you know. That's all any of us can do. Choose to be better than the people who hurt us." Tears welled in her eyes, and she nodded. "Thank you, Helen, for giving me a second chance at family." I squeezed her hand. "We all get second chances, even third and fourth. The trick is not wasting them when they come." Later that week, I called Jessica Rowe and told her I wanted to turn the downtown condo, the consolation prize Olivia had once mocked, into a refuge for women starting over. I want it to be a place for women who have nowhere to go, who need time to heal and plan their next steps. Jessica was quiet, then said, "That's beautiful, Helen. You're turning what they meant for harm into something good." I think that's the only way to win in the end. Spring came early that year. The roses budded, and sunlight painted every room with new promise. Ethan began making plans to buy a house nearby. Paige's visits became more frequent, sometimes ending with long walks in the garden, her laughter finally free and unafraid. On a bright morning, as I watched them from the kitchen window, I realized I'd survived the very thing I once feared would break me. I'd lost a husband, yes, and a daughter-in-law I'd once called family, but I'd found myself and discovered that my worth wasn't measured by what I could endure, but by what I could build when I refused to be destroyed. That night, as the three of us ate dinner together, Ethan lifted his glass. "To new beginnings, Mom, to second chances, and to never forgetting who we are." I raised my own glass, my heart full, to healing, to honesty, and to the family we choose for ourselves every single day. As we clinked our glasses, laughter and hope rising, I knew the story wasn't over, but for the first time, I was eager to see what the next chapter would bring. A month passed. Spring deepened, and with it, a slow but steady thaw began inside my heart. There were days when I expected to see Olivia's car darting around the corner, or hear Richard's heavy tread on the porch. Days when the wounds reopened in dreams. But each morning, sunlight spilled over the garden, drawing new green from the old earth, and I found myself breathing a little easier. Detective Martinez kept in touch, always professional, but I sensed his genuine concern. One afternoon, he visited, hat in hand, and sat with me at the kitchen table. "We found Olivia," he said quietly. "She's living under another name in a small town 2 states away. We've got enough evidence now to bring formal charges: identity theft, insurance fraud, and conspiracy." I felt nothing. No triumph, no bitterness. Just relief. The chase was over. "And Richard?" I asked. Martinez shook his head. "He's cooperating, but his part was mostly willful blindness, not direct criminal activity. If anything, he's more a victim of Olivia's manipulation than a co-conspirator, at least as far as the law is concerned." I thought of Richard, prideful, weak, never quite able to stand up for anything, not even his own happiness. It was a strange thing to realize. He had done all that harm, and in the end, he too had lost everything. As the legal process churned forward, I poured my energy into something new. The condo project became my mission. I met with Jessica, local charities, and a handful of women eager for a safe place to land. With each day, the hollow places Olivia had left were filled with purpose and possibility. Ethan threw himself into helping, volunteering to paint walls, build shelves, haul in old furniture from the attic. Paige took over the kitchen in the condo, transforming it with cheerful curtains and potted herbs. I watched them, quietly proud, as they built a home that would mean survival and hope for someone else. One evening, after a long day at the new refuge, Ethan pulled me aside. "Mom, do you ever regret not fighting dirtier? You could have exposed Olivia and Dad sooner, made them suffer more." I studied his face, so much like mine, but softer. "No, Ethan. If I'd let bitterness make me cruel, I'd have lost myself. I wanted justice, not revenge. I wanted you to see that we can lose everything and still keep our dignity. That's worth more than any moment of payback." He nodded, thinking it over. "I'm glad you're my mother," he said, and pulled me into a hug. For a moment, I let myself cry, letting go of all the years of being strong for everyone else. Paige found us there, her smile gentle. "You two are the bravest people I know. If you ever need help with the condo, well, I might have more friends who could use it too." In the months that followed, our world grew steadily richer with good people. I found myself surrounded by new faces: women healing, women building, neighbors who stopped by with casseroles and advice. I made new friends, real ones, who cared more for kindness than for keeping up appearances. Sometimes at night I would sit in the garden and listen to the wind and the roses, and the old loneliness would return. But it never lasted. Each time, I would remember how close I'd come to letting darkness win, and how, in the end, I'd chosen light instead. The court date came, and I attended as a witness. Olivia, in a plain suit, hair pulled back, looked small and pale. A woman finally caught by consequences she had always believed she could outrun. She would face sentencing soon, and for the first time, I saw in her eyes a flicker of regret. Not for what she'd done, perhaps, but for being so publicly exposed. After testifying, I walked out into the bright sunlight, Jessica at my side. She said, "You did the right thing, Helen." I looked back at the courthouse, a weight finally lifting. I'm ready for a real life now, one that's mine. When I came home that evening, Paige and Ethan were waiting in the kitchen, a simple dinner set out. Candles flickering, there was laughter, gentle teasing, stories told and retold. Everything a family should be. As we cleaned up, Paige paused by my side. "Do you believe people can really start over, Helen?" I thought of everything we'd lost and everything we'd found. I do. I believe starting over is what life is made of. We stood at the kitchen sink, shoulder to shoulder, as dusk crept in. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. And in that peace, I realized something beautiful. I had not just survived my story, I had rewritten it. Summer settled over the old house with gentle warmth. The garden bloomed in wild color, and sunlight danced through open windows. My days began early, always in the kitchen. Coffee brewing, bread rising, the sounds of laughter from Ethan and Paige drifting in from the porch. In the evenings, neighbors and friends gathered for long dinners under strings of lights, voices weaving together stories old and new. The downtown condo, once a symbol of what I'd lost, had become something precious. Every room echoed with the tentative voices of women learning to trust themselves again. Sometimes, on quiet afternoons, I'd sit with them over tea and listen, truly listen to their stories. Each tale of survival and loss, each burst of laughter or fragile hope reminded me that no one is beyond repair. The scars simply become part of the map. There were still echoes of the past. Occasionally, Richard would call or send a letter. Never angry, not anymore. Just sad, remorseful. I never answered. I'd said all I needed. Forgiveness, I found, wasn't always an open door. Sometimes it's simply letting go. Olivia's name, too, became a shadow in conversation. A cautionary tale, nothing more. Her sentencing came and went. I didn't attend. Some endings are best observed from a distance. Her power over us was gone. I had no wish to revisit the ruins. Ethan and Paige flourished in their own way. They married the following spring in the rose garden, surrounded by friends who had become our family. Watching them promise kindness and honesty to each other, I felt the circle close. A life fractured, then mended, not by force, but by patient, determined love. On quiet mornings, I'd walk the garden paths and remember the women who came before me. My grandmother, who hid money in mason jars and grew victory gardens during the war. My mother, who taught me to see strength not just in surviving, but in refusing to let bitterness grow where beauty could bloom. I thought of all the ways I had been broken, and all the ways I had put myself back together. Always, always with my own hands. And now, I look in the mirror and see someone new. Someone forged by fire and yet still gentle. I am not just Helen, not just a mother, not just a survivor. I am the architect of my own life, keeper of my family's legacy, builder of safe harbors, protector of hope. The world outside remains uncertain. There will always be those who take and betray, who mistake kindness for weakness, but there will always be those who love fiercely, who tell hard truths, who risk everything to do what's right. And as long as I draw breath, I will choose the latter, again and again. On the night of our first summer dinner party, Ethan raised his glass, the candlelight flickering across his proud face. To Mom, who taught us that real strength is gentle and that there's nothing more powerful than refusing to let others decide your worth. Everyone toasted, and I felt a deep, quiet happiness settle over me. If you're listening to my story, maybe you're at your own crossroads, maybe your heart is broken, or you've been betrayed. Know this: you are not alone. The worst things do not define you. You can build again, even with trembling hands. Trust the slow work of healing. Stand up for yourself, even when your voice shakes. Choose hope. Now I'm curious about you too. What would you have done in my place? Have you faced your own betrayals, your own rebuildings? Share your story in the comments. Let's remind each other how far we can come. And if you're searching for strength or for a new beginning, look at the stories I've left on the final screen. They'll show you just how powerful you really are. Thank you for listening, for believing, for being part of my journey. I hope you find the peace and the courage you deserve.